On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, what can three of the most memorable games of this season tell us about where things went wrong for the Raptors and where things could go right as soon as next year? We get into that as we review the games of the year on today's show. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, April the 9th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Bad website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link is in the description of the podcast. And again, it's free to join. It's a great place to come talk about the Raptors on the internet in a place where you won't get screamed at, unless, of course, you're disagreeing with my takes, in which case I will dress you down. Either way, come hang out. It's a lovely little family we got building around the show. We'd love to see you join it and come talk some ball. Playoffs coming up soon. Draft stuff is never ending in there. Lots of talk about food and Durham region food hotspots, among other things, over the last 24 hours. Come hang out in the Discord. We'd love to see you. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Always appreciated when you support the show, however you support the show. You can also do that by going to YouTube and subscribing to the video version of the show on the tube. When you do that, hit the notification bell as well, and you'll get a heads up via push notification every single time the show is about to premiere or go live. So go do that, would you? Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs, who help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's get to it. On today's show, it's the final week of the season. We're winding things down here, and we're beginning our sort of post-mortem on the season. We'll talk about the games to come, of course, the Pacers game, the Nets game. We'll do the full recap, good, bad, et cetera, for those as we usually do. But we're kind of out of things to learn about this team, and now we're in reflection mode and sort of tracking where things went wrong this season, how things can go right next year, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought it'd be an interesting exercise to kind of go through and look at some of the most memorable games of this season from the Toronto Raptors end of things. And look, I'm going to focus mostly on the positive memories because, you know, what's healthy? You repress the bad stuff, right? That's good for your brain, repressing the bad memories. I'm not a therapist. I don't know. But either way, I think it's an interesting kind of exercise. And I had a fun time going back and rewatching these games a little bit today, putting this podcast together just to sort of see where things began, the things that could have gone right had things broken a certain way for the Raptors, and of course where they are now, and you know, sort of things from the back part of the season to glom onto as reasons for hope and optimism going into next season. We're going to dig into games that cover all of these different things. But let's begin with number one, the sort of top of mind game for me. And I think there's a couple candidates from the early part of the season you could have picked here. I think the home opener against the Wolves, who obviously ended up being one of the best teams in the league, beating them 98-97, just a really lockdown defensive effort with some pretty grim offensive work as well. That was a pretty big highlight, I think. I think a lot of people really sort of gravitated to that in the Discord when I asked for sort of honorable mentions for best games of the season. That one came up quite a bit. I think I'm going about a week later, November the 1st, the Raptors take on the Milwaukee Bucks and absolutely smack them down 130-111, where I think this was probably the example of the idea of the team at the start of the year working as well as it could have. And look, we have to say, the team they had at the start of the year, I don't think was the team the front office even wanted. We know this with regards to Pascal Siakam and their telegraphed attempt to trade him over the summer, to barely feature him in the team coming into the year. This was a game where off-ball Pascal Siakam probably had his best night before they eventually integrated him more into the core of the offense, as he had a 5 of 8 game shooting from downtown and completely lit the Nets on fire. This was the Raptors' third best offensive game of the season per clean the glass. We'll talk about number one coming up later on today as well. But in this game, the Raptors scored at 135.6 points per 100 possessions rate. Their 15th best defensive game of the season as well. Not a lot of good defensive gems to pull from this year. So in the top 15, pretty darn good. This was a game where you saw them absolutely murder the Bucks in transition. So many sequences of that starting five of Schroeder, Barnes, Anunoby, Siakam, and Poeltl doing what I think was intended with that starting five before things really fell off the rails over the following month and a half. But in that first couple of weeks, it was a lockdown defensive unit. It was forcing a ton of turnovers, and it was running with all reckless abandon off of those turnovers, right? We saw so many instances in this game of, Jakob Poeltl gets a block and they quickly, get it down the floor with two passes and there's a bucket for somebody. Dennis Schroder gets a steal. He spins and throws an outlet pass to OG Anunoby for a bucket. A lot of OG finishing really nice transition sequences in this game. You had the Pascal Siakam grabbing, I think, a steal or a rebound, throwing a one hit ahead pass to Scottie Barnes up on the wing, who then throws a touch pass over to OG Anunoby, no bounces, and a bucket for the Raptors out of that one as well. That was the idea of this team and what was going to make this team work. Like a top 10 defense, which they were playing like early in the season for a very fleeting moment there, and an offense that got by, not by killing you in the half court. We still saw plenty of issues with the machinations of the half court offense in this game, although it was probably one of their better efforts early on. But this was all about incredible defense followed by a devastating transition attack. And there is a world in which that worked for this team. There is a world in which OG Anunoby doesn't quiet quit, in which Dennis Schroder is sort of reined in a little bit as far as his role in the offense, and he's more sort of relegated to being a catch and shoot guy who maybe runs with second units. This was not the optimal use of Dennis Schroder to me early on in the season. And we saw that lineup eventually just kind of ran out of ideas defensively. Their length just didn't seem to matter. OG wasn't the same guy. Dennis Schroder was getting beat at the point of attack, I think probably because he was overburdened on the offensive end. And we saw later in the year in a game we're going to talk about soon, where he was fantastic defensively coming off the bench because he wasn't being asked to run 1,000 pick and rolls a game and be the main sort of source of offensive creation for the team anymore. And he could lean into his on-ball pest sort of persona. We didn't have that in his early game. This was, again, sort of an example of had everything worked, this is probably how it would have looked. And, I was very bullish on this defense. It's one of the things I was most wrong about coming into the year. I thought this defense, just on the pure talent alone, let alone scheme, I thought, the scheme, they were going to be more conservative compared to the Nick Nurse scheme, where at some point it all kind of just came unspooled under Nick Nurse, and they lost the sort of connectivity that you need to play a super aggressive defense like that. I think it just wore them down eventually, physically, mentally, etc. And I thought a more conservative approach, a traditional drop big in Jakob Poeltl, a really good on-the-ball hound in Dennis Schroder, hopefully some steps forward from Scottie Barnes, and then, Pascal and OG with their length on the wings. I thought this was going to be a fantastic defensive team. Obviously, that was not the case. But it was nice for that one game, or for a couple of weeks there, especially that game against the Bucks. Of course, this one came on the heels of a nasty loss to the Blazers on the Monday of that week that kind of portended a lot of the bad stuff that would eventually undo this team before the new year came around. This was also a game where you got like Otto Porter in maybe his best off the bench work of the season. He had 6 points, played like 20 minutes, was really nice as a spacer and connector and defender in those second units. Again, this was the formula as it was intended working. Chris Boucher had a really nice game off the bench as well. This was a game where, they kind of had contributions from up and down. They had 10 guys play 13 or more minutes in this game. There was like depth on display in a way they haven't really had before. Grady Dick played 21 minutes in this game. This was still in the Grady Dick kind of missing everything phase. 5 points, 2 of 10, 1 of 8 from deep. Obviously, things got a lot better from there. I believe the following game, he had some success against the Sixers. Or it might have been the week before that he had the success against the Sixers, one of his early season gems. But, running through the starting five, Pascal, 26, 6 and 7, 5 of 8 from downtown, 9 of 13 overall, kind of indicating his lessened role in the offense, but still an ability to be damn effective within that role. OG, 7 of 7 from the field, again, finishing a whole lot of wide open buckets in transition. Excellent defensive work from him, as we know. Scottie Barnes, this was kind of one of those first inklings of, okay, like something's happening here with Scottie Barnes. This is still 5 games into his breakout season, and you weren't sure what's real, what's not. 21, 12, and 5 with a steal and 2 blocks, an 8 of 16, 4 of 6 from downtown. There was a world in which this team made sense and was a sort of plucky 7-8 type seed in the Eastern Conference. Maybe not what everybody wants, and I certainly was not a huge fan of Dennis Schroder being the lead guard on this team, but that game against the Bucks was the night where if you wanted to be an optimist about the early season version of the team, that was it. And of course, a whole lot came crashing down after that as the offense decayed, more so the defense decayed and just kind of forgot how to be good at defense. Their transition game suffered as a result. OG stopped playing defense, and from here on, things kind of decayed. But it was pretty nice for that one hot second to think, oh, maybe there's something here with this team with a bit of a guard addition or something like that. Like there's some bones here of a damn good defensive team that you can kind of use as your calling card. And that calling card got lost in the washing machine or something sometime in the middle of November. With that, let's go into the second game that I think kind of helps tell the tale of this season. And that is one post OG Anunoby trade, post the nasty November and December swoon for this team. And we'll get into one of those games, a game that is maybe the biggest what if of the season for me. We'll get to that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn is a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals with a B. That's right, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, and LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. When you're hiring for your small business, you got to find those quality candidates, and LinkedIn Jobs is the best tool to help you find those people. Hiring is easy when you have so many qualified candidates coming in. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours after posting on LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing a lot of different hats. And you might not have the time or resources to hire. I said this before. I used to be a hiring manager in a job of mine, and it's a lot. It is a challenging thing. And if you're running a small business, it's just a massive headache on top of all the other stuff you got to do through your day. So find someone who can do it for you. That's LinkedIn Jobs. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should too. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back at it here, taking a look at the games of the year for your Toronto Raptors. And again, I kind of tried to take the approach of these were highlight games that also kind of document the various iterations of the team, the roller coaster up and down, the sort of flashpoint moments of the season. Maybe you have other games you think are more memorable. Please drop them in the chat. There were plenty of good sort of honorable mentions. I mentioned that Wolves game to start the season, which feels so long ago, years ago, not just months, years and years. Watching back these games today, like watching Dennis Schroder and Pascal Siakam and Otto Porter Jr. play for the Raptors heavy minutes was pretty wild. Yeah, it's been quite a year, has it not? Let's get into the second game. This one, some more familiar faces than you'll see if you watch back that Raptors-Bucks game from early November. This game comes January the 7th on the road. The Toronto Raptors take the boots to the Golden State Warriors. This was that week after the OG trade where things seemed pretty all right. Things seemed like they were looking up. Of course, that first game out of the gate, another honorable mention that people mentioned as a fun game to kind of sort of tell the tale of the season was that first game against the Cavaliers. The Raptors hang on and win with the new crew of dudes. And, I mean, that was certainly a blast of a game. But this one against the Warriors I chose because of its importance, I think, in terms of the fallout of what took place within this game. Of course, this is the game Jakob Poeltl turns his ankle. He finishes the game out, but then misses like a month. And in that time, the Raptors lose their identity. They lose their most important center. They lose half their playbook because he's the guy through which so much ran, and you just weren't going to replicate that with, old over-under Jonte Porter or, Chris Boucher filling in as the backup five. Even Scottie Barnes as the backup five just wasn't going to cut it. Jakob Poeltl was incredibly important to this version of the team, and not having him was devastating to their chances of putting together serious ball. And I do classify this game as a massive what if for the Raptors because I am fascinated to know what was in the head of the front office. Were they looking at this and saying, hey, like, let's give this thing some run? We make the OG trade late December. It gives us like 5 weeks pre-deadline to make a call on, do we actually go through with trading Pascal Siakam, or do we see what's here? The first 4 games out of the OG trade looked pretty damn promising. They beat the Cavs. They beat the Grizzlies in a super fun game on the road. They have that game against the Kings where they get waxed in the first half, come back with a brilliant second half, almost pull it out. You start to see the very beginnings of like the Scottie IQ pairing and a lot of Scottie Yak pick and roll that was getting them tons of really great looks. That was a really fun game. And then you go to that game against the Warriors, and they just absolutely demolish the Warriors in this game. At one point, they're up at like 26 points in the first half. RJ Barrett has a massive game, 37, 6 and 6, still in the sort of early, like, is this a real thing sort of phase with RJ? Obviously, he's had like 2 bad games since this game on January the 7th. He's been just so metronomically consistent and reliable. It feels very much real that RJ Barrett's just this guy now. But when he put up that 37, 6 and 6, it was like, okay, this is interesting. I don't know how much to buy it, but he goes 5 of 8 from deep. He hits every single thing in transition around the rim. Was just an absolute monster in this game, goes 13 of 20. And then on top of that, you get, a weird Scottie Barnes game. He has only 6 points in this one of his lower scoring outputs of the entire season. But also in this game, you get Scottie Barnes playing maybe one of his better defensive games of the season and one of his most surprisingly good defensive games because he was asked to guard Steph Curry a ton. And typically, we know Scottie Barnes guarding dudes in space, not really a thing that bears a lot of fruit. But in this game, Steph goes 2 of 14, looks totally thrown off by Scottie's length. Scottie does a great job moving his feet, sticking with them through the maze of screens the Warriors love to run Steph Curry through. And despite just the 6 points, I thought he was a damn effective player in this game. Yak goes for 14, 11, and 5, and it's just this sort of fulcrum at the center of the offense where things are flowing off of him. The passing in this game is just outstanding. And it all looks like it's kind of coalescing into something pretty interesting here. Siakam doesn't have to do a lot. They blow the Warriors out, right? He only plays 30 minutes. He has 16, 6 and 6 on 7 of 11, 2 of 3 from downtown. You got Dennis Schroder coming off the bench where he looked really good as a reserve bench guy. And the further we get away from the Dennis Schroder for nothing trade, the more I kind of scratch my head at the Dennis Schroder for nothing trade. Be kind of nice to have that guy around in a bench role. I know the sort of politics and locker room dynamics maybe were what soured that whole thing, and so there's only so much you can do about it. But in a bench role, he was fantastic. He played 28 minutes in this game. He had 13 points. He had 4 assists. Wasn't commandeering the offense. Only took 10 shots. Just looked like a really nice second unit orchestrator, and it gave them, with Immanuel Quickley, just like a bounty of a guard play that we had not seen this team have for quite some time, and since the Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet era, basically. And so this was just like a really thrilling game for what could have been. Chris Boucher, a really nice game as well. Kind of a through line in the Raptors' best games this season. Chris Boucher popping off. He goes for 17 on 7 of 7 shooting, is a plus 17 off the bench. This was a game where, if you're the kind of person like me who is a big proponent of the Quickley, Siakam, Barnes, Barrett quartet can work. And, Poeltl's obviously going to be part of that. My sort of thinking was eventually you swap out Poeltl for a different center with that group to sort of make it work a little bit more spacing wise. But this was a game that was sort of, if you were of the mind that they could have kept Pascal Siakam around and that group of players deserve some time to marinate with one another and figure each other out, this was the game you go to. And it's a shame that it didn't get to sort of get more time in the hopper. Obviously, Yak gets hurt. We never see Yak play with Pascal Siakam again. Heartbreaking stuff. It was a game that I really, that's sort of like week of basketball. Probably the most fun that anyone had watching the Raptors this season, I'd argue. It was a damn good time. The vibes were like corrected and back. It seemed like they were going to go on a bit of a run, pull themselves back to 500. They were 15 and 21 after this game, so it didn't feel like they were all that far out of things. I can't believe they only won 10 games since this game on January the 7th. My God, it's been a rough go here in 2024. But this game was an exciting one. Again, if Yak doesn't get hurt, if he doesn't miss those 2 weeks where the Raptors basically lose every game but one after he goes down, like, how many wins, how many excellent performances does it take for the front office to say, oh, like maybe we should just hang on to Pascal and figure out other ways to supplement this team? Maybe we trade the 31st pick for Kelly Olynyk instead of the Thunder Clippers weird pick that they had. Maybe that's something they still try to go and do at the deadline. Maybe they are more of a buy forward team. Maybe they're looking to hang on to Dennis Schroder and keep him around as a nice backup, guard piece. Like, there was a pathway here for this team to work, much like there was a pathway, although I think a less clear pathway for the early season version of the team to work. I do think the team on January the 7th had a shot. Like, they had a Barrett, Poeltl, Siakam, Quickley, Barnes, Schroder, Trent, Boucher, top 8. That's not nothing. Like, that's a real group. If you find a way to add Olynyk at the deadline still with that 31st pick, like, you're looking at a pretty decent 9-man rotation, all but one of whom you can bring back next season. Gary Trent Jr. you could keep. It might get expensive with the team they had, but I think there was something there. Obviously, Grady Dick was not part of the plans in this game. Had he been in there, maybe that even sort of adds more juice to like there's something here cooking with all of these different parts. It's a tough game. It's a bittersweet one because it was so damn fun to watch in the moment. I had a blast rewatching it today, and yet still, it's just sort of a weird little oddity in Raptors history. One of 4 games where they had that crew of guys together, that starting 5 that over those 4 games was a +5 net rating, looked pretty darn good and effective and like they fit. And if the shooting was there from Scottie and from Quickley and from Barrett at the levels that we've kind of seen this season, Barnes, obviously his 3-point shooting went on a tailspin from here, mostly I think due to Pascal no longer being around and his burden changing and all of that, his shot chart changing. But I do think there was enough here that it was worth giving some time to. I mean, we just will never know what the Raptors front office was thinking, how many games it would have taken of them looking that dominant, that good. This was their best offensive game of the entire season and still is to this date, nearly 140 offensive rating. If they keep on doing that and putting up 130 offensive rating, 140 offensive rating, big win, 130 points here, 125 here, I'm curious, like, was it 10 games? Was it 12 games? Was it 15? Was it 0 games? Was their mind already made up? That's very possible as well. But the sort of what ifs of what if Yak doesn't get hurt in this game and they get to continue this run for a little bit, I think are pretty fascinating. Because we know it's followed up by the 2 games against the Clippers and Lakers where they perform really admirably, but they just don't have the juice to get it over the line. And then after that, the lack of Poeltl really starts to take effect, and the team just can't pick up a win to save its life. And Pascal Siakam gets traded. We know what all happens from there. It's tough stuff. At least if you're in the Pascal should have been kept around camp, which I know I've probably made it known too many times in this podcast. That's where I currently stand. Either way, let's wrap it up. We'll get to a game from a little bit more recently, but also still feels like a very long time ago, that if you're looking for kernels of optimism for next season, this is the one you watch. This is the game you go and view like a dozen times over the course of the summer to satiate your desire for good Raptors basketball and reasons to feel good about what's coming up next season. We're talking about Raptors Pacers, February 26th, coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. And look, man, the sports calendar is popping the hell off. Concerts are coming back, outdoor concerts. We love outdoor concerts. We love summertime concerts. All of this stuff, it's all available for you at Game Time, the single best place to go and buy tickets for your favorite sporting events, concerts, theater, comedy. It's all there for you. It's a wonderful app. I use it all the time. It's my favorite ticket app, and I'm not just saying that. I've used it to buy Seattle Storm tickets, literally at the gates of Climate Pledge Arena, standing outside, pulled up the Game Time app, bought tickets for like $6 a pop in the lower bowl just before game time because those last-minute deals are great. I went in, had a blast of a time watching the Seattle Storm and the Phoenix Mercury in the summer. I also use Game Time to buy Wilco tickets. I'm going to see Wilco at Massey Hall in July, and that's all available for you on Game Time as well. Blue Jays, whatever it is, all sorts of summertime events are made a lot easier because you take the guesswork out of buying tickets when you go to Game Time. Take the guesswork out. Buy your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Just a note, it's a new promo code. So if you've used a former promo code before, this is a new one to get you a fresh $20 off. LOCKEDONNBA is the promo code. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, wrapping up the show here. Just a reminder, you can go and find Locked On Sports Today 24/7 on YouTube. It is Locked On's all-day streaming channel with Locked On shows from all of the local hosts, the national shows, covering the biggest stories in sports. Whole lot of college basketball talk today. Locked On women's basketball, of course. Locked On college basketball is going to cover UConn taking down Purdue in the final for their second straight NCAA men's title. It's all there for you. Go check it out. If you're a playoffs fan, of course, basketball, hockey, it's all going to be there for you on the 24/7 channel as well. So go subscribe to it. It's great. All right, let's wrap it up here with a look at a game from this season, one of the games of the year that I think is, again, I said it before the break, the biggest reason for optimism going into next season. The sort of blueprint of what can be in 6 to 8 months' time, whenever the hell the season starts again. I don't know. It seems a very long time away. It's the pizza party game, baby. It's the third straight win for the Raptors, 130-122 over the Pacers on the road on February the 26th. This was their 22nd win of the season. They have won 3 games since then, 2 of which have come in the last week, which is depressing. But this game, before everything went downhill as Scottie Barnes got hurt later this week, this was the game that I think engendered the most excitement for me about what this team could be. And it was a real example of, this thing is coming together in a pretty fascinating way. And a lot of these pieces are going to be around next season. So let's get excited. This was, of course, in Indiana, one of the first games. It might have been the first game they played against Pascal. I can't remember exactly when they played Pascal the first time because I'm sad and was trying to repress all those memories. Remember? Repress memories. They're good. But the Raptors take down the Pacers 130-122. Pretty fascinating game, all told. The Raptors have a pretty rough defensive performance, as you do against the Pacers, but their 7th best offensive game of the season. This was a game where they absolutely demolished the Pacers at the rim. 47% of their attempts came at the rim, and they converted on 81% of them. Jakob Poeltl, really good game from him. 15, 10, and 4 with a block, 7 of 10, just kind of munching on the inside. It really, just kind of seeping into space, getting those little dump off passes, finishing around the rim, 5 offensive rebounds for him as well. Really good stuff from him. RJ Barrett, like a classic RJ Barrett line, 24, 2 and 5 on 11 to 16, 2 or 3 from deep. Yeah, that's what you expect. Immanuel Quickley, really solid game, 19 points, 3 of 7 from deep. Not the sort of overwhelming lead ball handler we've seen from Quickley during his stretch since Scottie Barnes went down. But he was still damn good, offering that spacing, offering just like a real jitterbug element to this team that has just not been there. And man, oh man, is Immanuel Quickley a lot of fun to watch. Go listen to yesterday's episode if you haven't yet, where I gush about Immanuel Quickley and his extremely high upside. But obviously the sort of big takeaway from this game, 2 big takeaways. Scottie Barnes, 21 points, 12 boards, 12 assists, 5 blocks. Just an insane game from Scottie Barnes. And obviously one of the very first games in the sort of, hey, I'm the dude now sort of version of the team where it was settled around him. They knew what the team was going to be. Kelly Olynyk was there. This was just coming out of the All-Star break, like the 3rd or 4th game coming out. And Scottie Barnes was fantastic. He was just outstanding. Finishing in transition, finishing around the rim, creating and sort of making beautifully connective passes where, just sort of being the cog from, hey, Jakob Poeltl the elbow, swings it over to the wing, and then a quick dump down from Scottie and a touch pass, like that type of stuff. Orchestrating in transition beautifully as well, as the Raptors punished the Pacers on the run in this one, as they do in a lot of their best games, of course. This was also a huge game. The sort of second really big exciting thing, Grady Dick, 18 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, a steal in this game, 7 of 9 from the field, 4 of 4 from downtown. Absolutely money. This is the game where he really was showing a lot of connectivity with Scottie Barnes, those sort of beautiful off-ball cuts. That was the one where he had this sort of cut into the middle of the floor where Scottie threw up the lob for him. He just kind of finished a bit like a delicate pirouette in the air. Beautiful stuff from Grady Dick. Really nice game from him. Kelly Olynyk kind of getting comfortable, 7 boards, 5 assists. This was a game where the Raptors looked legit against a legit team in the Pacers. And this was the game where if you're sort of on this team can be a play-in team next season and maybe even more, this is the game you look at. This game featured guys who are going to be playing heavy minutes for the team next season. There's the Poeltl, Trent, Barrett, Quickley, Barnes starting lineup. They were fantastic in this game. And that lineup has been really good together whenever they've played. Still like a plus 11 net rating, plus 11.8 maybe it is. It's really, really good. They are crushing teams, or they have crushed teams. They're not going to crush any more teams the rest of the season, but they were crushing teams when they were playing together. You had that Bruce Brown, Ochai Agbaji, Grady Dick, Kelly Olynyk group playing with Scottie Barnes and or Emmanuel Quickley in second units. That was really fun and coming together and figuring out some stuff. Probably their best game overall in terms of driving positive play as a group together as well. Not a great Bruce Brown game, just 1 of 4 of -8 in 16 minutes, but everyone else chipped in. Ochai, 13 points, 2 boards, 2 assists, 4 of 7 from the field, 1 of 2 from downtown. Just a really collective effort for a team that is going to be about collective efforts. I think there's going to be different guys every night who are sort of the lead offensive stars, because Scottie Barnes is maybe not the type of guy who's just going to go score 30 points every single night, but that's fine because he can throw 12 assists and have an easy triple-double with 21, 12, and 12. And again, 5 blocks, basically whatever he wants when he's kind of locked in and he's doing the Scottie Barnes thing. It was, this is the game you highlight. This is the game where you look at the starting 5 and say, you know what, maybe Gary Trent Jr. fits here. This wasn't even a very good Gary Trent Jr. game. He just goes 1 of 6 from downtown, but he's in there. He's offering the space. He's offering breathing room for other guys on the floor, not taking away too much. It's not like he was commandeering the offense or anything like that and sort of shooting them out of it. No, he was just kind of in a reserved, nice 5th guy option role, which is a perfectly good place for Gary Trent Jr. to be, and a place I think he can probably live just fine in the Raptors starting 5. This also, I think, showcased what the formula will have to be next season as well, where you're banking on this team being like an upper crust offense, right? You're hoping they can be like a top 10 offense and just squeak by with like a pretty okay, not terrible defense. The formula is probably like last year's Sacramento Kings, although like a little bit less of a extreme sort of incredible offense, horrible defense. Is probably more of like a pretty good offense, fine defense is what you're hoping for from the Raptors next season. They're not going to be the type of team that's locking teams down in the top 5 of defense over the course of the season, unless they go and find some ridiculous lockdown wing type, which doesn't seem terribly likely because there ain't that many guys, those guys available around at any time. But if they can go and find one, that changes their sort of geometry on defense, that changes their upside. But for now, the formula for next year's team figures to be our offense is beautiful. There's going to be a ton of passing. Everyone can make a play. Everyone can finish a play. This is going to be a productive offense basically for 48 minutes a night with with Quickley, with Barnes sprinkling into second units, Grady Dick hopefully taking a bit of a jump forward as well. That's the plan. And then from there, you got to build up the defense from there. And that's going to be the thing that takes them from sort of plucky play-in team, hopefully next season, to legitimate real playoff team. The avenue to get there, we'll see how that, how they travel it, if they can find a guy to fill in the defensive gaps. But for now, this game against the Pacers, 130-122, an up and down affair, a super fun to watch affair. The passing in this game, I mentioned the passing in the Warriors game. This passing in this game against the Pacers is just an absolute delight to watch. So many gorgeous sequences of 3, 4, 5 guys making the next play to create a better shot for somebody else. That's Darko ball kind of at its peak. And that is why this game to me stands out as a real memorable and a really important sort of flashpoint of, okay, like things have been awful. They've won 3 games since this game. They've been a nightmare. It's just been a hell season, top to bottom, injuries, et cetera, et cetera. There is still something interesting going on here. And I don't like the way they got to it with the way this season transpired from Jump Street. But if you're trying to feel okay, if you're trying to, recover from podcast meltdowns had last week, like I am, this is the game you go and sort of soothe your soul with and say, hey, you know what? It might just be all right when things get rolling in 2024, 25. That feels like a good place to leave it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope this was an interesting episode. I know like revisiting stuff that's happened is maybe not always the best stuff, but I thought this was a pretty interesting one. Tell me if you disagree. Tell me if there were other games that I missed that were really good ones you wanted to point out as well. The Thunder game where they lost in double OT is one that came up. That was a fun one. No matter what, the result was, that was a blast to see them hang with a team that good. Some pretty good ones from that sort of very brief post-deadline stretch to the time Scottie Barnes got hurt. That beautiful 3-week stretch of February, of which a week and a half of it is All-Star break. It was a blast. Either way, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you again tomorrow as Katie Heindel will be along to talk about Raptors, Pacers. Raptors going for pizza party number 2, also against the Pacers. what a great indignity it would be for the Indiana Pacers to be the team that gives the Raptors their second 3-game winning streak. Hilarious is actually the word for it. So we'll have that. Later in the week, we're going to take up our bold predictions with Joseph Cacharo. Jamar will be along on Thursday to talk about Raptors Nets. We got a loaded week for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the show by following, subscribing, rating, reviewing, telling all your friends. And we'll talk to you again on Wednesday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye.